welcome back to the second hour of Altered Egos. My name is Bob Hansen, and thank you for hanging in there. And I have on the line Nicole Lebrasseur. Good afternoon, Nicole.
Hey, good morning, Bob. How are you?
Very, very well. Firstly, to listeners who are not familiar with Nicole Lebrasseur, she's a research and lay political scientist, I would say. And she's working on direct democracy, people. I mean, we just had an election in BC. You have to almost go through a fit these days when you have an election. I don't enjoy elections at all anymore. It's just it's a real chore, to tell you the truth. I'm not getting what I want, presented to me for one, but, not just bitching about it. We have to be clear that we have to change this situation because it's not going to change itself. And you know what? The time is right. And I just want to say before we start, Nicole,
the following contains mature subject matter and may not be suitable for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
And that's mostly because you fire me up and we get carried away like always. And so a lot's happened this week, not just the election, as though that were really huge. It's just pretty much more of the same, although damn, I don't think I talked to anybody who wants to keep the present government in power. But we won't know the answer for another 10 or 15 days.
Yeah, which is kind of surprising as to why the Liberals came back in BC, right?
You mean that they're in power right now?
Yeah, even as much as they are. I mean, if you look at across Canada, when you're listening to the people, what the people are saying does not match the polls at all. You have to wonder what's going on there. Across the whole country, you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, well, we know about that. This being a media outlet ourselves here at CHLY, we know that corporate media will not put out material that might be sensitive for their advertising clientele. And so we don't get news in print, in broadcast, or you name it. We just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, the fascism and the dictatorship going around at every level of business and within these corporations is actually what is not helping Canadians to find out the truth. And there's, it's really hard to do what I'm doing. When we last spoke, I forgot to mention that what I did is I created we're trying to get people to sign the Convention of Consent, which is a legally binding agreement between the Canadian citizens, and which is actually a kind of a people's referendum, because our governments won't give it to us. Our provincial governments or federal won't even touch it. They haven't even changed constitutionally, who's in charge of Canada now, which is the people since 1982 officially, but actually was in effect since 1931, because they are so scared to have to change the Constitution because we might, come up with new strategies in regards to our voting system, and they want to try and remain in control of that. So what I did is I created a moratorium on change.org, because people love petitions, but they won't sign something that will actually change their lives. So I figured, okay, well, I'm totally against petitions because, number one, they do not serve anything other than just blow hot air, make people think that they're doing something, and in the end, the governments might talk about it, or if it's, I've seen petitions that were geared to do exactly what the government wanted the people to do. So, huge manipulation going on there. So what I did is I changed this petition into an actual legally binding agreement between all of the people who go to change.org and search for a moratorium on privatization and globalization. And they'll be able to find our not petition, but our legally binding agreement on a petition site.
Yes, I want to make that abundantly clear. I concur completely with you, except on the part of the usefulness of petitions. Petitions are for the public to realize they're not alone, in my opinion. If they have a feeling something should be done, they can toss their name in the hat, then we count up the names, and that can have an influence. For example, it looks like the House of Commons is going to vote on proportional representation or first past the post for the next election. And I'd be surprised if they vote it down, frankly, since they got...
Right, but again, that is bait and switch tactics. They want everything that happened in regards to proportional representation, which is BS as far as I'm concerned. It's another scam set up by the government, and they always want to, it's like rats in a maze, and this is what we are. And when you look at the history and everything that they've done, what they pretend to help you with, they will open another back door to get even better access while you're sleeping at the wheel.
Totally.
And thinking that they're actually helping you out when really they're just tightening the noose. And I've seen that with foreign workers. So, when I'm looking at proportional representation, that's all BS. Oh, yeah, people can sign this petition and we're going to have a voice. It's all, if you look and you read all of the documentation under the UNPAN at the United Nations on how they're telling governments how to get the people on board and to seem like, they're helping the people and to get them to a false direct democracy system, give them open governance, and they're going to think that they're getting their voice heard. It's all a crock of shit.
Okay, so let me ask you this then, because I fully agree that direct democracy has to be the outcome. Even if we get proportional rep, it's only a stepping stone to direct democracy. Is there a way that a question on proportional representation could also include direct democracy the way you conceive of it?
Well, we've tried that, and even there was a company that had created this new online thing for and the government actually funded them. And when I asked for them to add direct democracy on there, not at all. They said, "Oh, well, we have it covered under e-democracy." I said, "Well, that's bullshit. E-democracy does not mean direct democracy."
Right. True that. Okay, so it's pretty rational to consider that we won't get it from the present structure of party systems, because it will definitely just blow that all apart, right? And the corporations who are behind the party structure, they won't allow that to happen. However, we can't jump from the party system direct into full on into direct democracy without a lot of hassle in the streets, if you know what I mean. And I'm being really euphemistic.
It's not that hard to figure out. We can take baby steps here.
Yes.
Because the first thing that people need to ask themselves, who is the best person to decide for you, your family, and your country? You are a politician. And right now, when we're looking at the politicians, and I put in, you had answered, you had put some comments there on Facebook where Paul had posted, Paul Chauvin posted a question, and he got Tracy Ramsey in there, which is an NDP from Windsor, Ontario. And she started commenting on what's happening with Trudeau and that infrastructure bank.
Right. Okay.
So
let's get into that then.
Yeah, and I was supposed to tell you what I was hoping you'd ask me, what do you think of that infrastructure bank thing, with Trudeau? And I was like, well, I really don't have any ideas on that, Bob.
You'd say that on Facebook or on air here now?
No, on the air, because you mentioned that before during the show. And I thought, okay, I'm going to surprise him.
Oh, good for you. I love surprises. Okay, so let's just back up a wee bit. COMER, C-O-M-E-R, the Committee on Monetary and Electoral Economic Reform, had hired or dealt with Rocco Galati, a super lawyer in Canada, and he had petitioned the Supreme Court. First of all, I guess he got stopped, couldn't go to the court. They wouldn't look at his stuff. And then he regrouped and petitioned at the Supreme Court level, saying essentially that, we have this act and we should use it and blah, blah. And they won't even hear his case because they say COMER is not a legal representation of the Canadian public, right? So the Charter of Rights and Freedom, and you've brought this up before this judgment came down. You've been saying this for a year, I think, that actually, COMER is in a soft spot in this case because they do not have any legitimate authority to represent the rest of Canada. However, you said the corporate law can deal with this, and that's where your I accuse document comes in. So
exactly,
feel that
because we are political part. See, that the judges will say that they can't enforce they can't judge on our political system because it's not justifiable, because it is the will of the people. And it is under corporate law. so this is why we created the Convention of Consent, because since they won't give us referendums, then we have to take this back into our hands, and then we can do it step by step. The first thing that needs to happen is to remove final decision-making authority out of the hands of all levels of governance.
So then they'd have to come to us when they say, for example, we're going to form this infrastructure bank, Nicole. What do you think?
It has to go to referendum.
Yes. Exactly. That's what I'm suggesting. And this is the kicker, people. Don't forget, this Comer decision just came down, this week, Nicole, I think it was?
It came down on the 4th of April.
Okay. So almost immediately, within a few weeks, Trudeau is hammering at this infrastructure bank, which is the alternative to the Bank of Canada. Only the infrastructure bank will be at interest, so Canadians will pay more money on interest, plus there'll be a hook in there for private investors to have their hands on our Canadian bought and paid for infrastructure assets, bridges, toll roads, any other buildings, perhaps even hospitals. This is a real mess, people. We cannot allow this to happen. This is privatization of public assets writ large when we don't need to, because we have the Bank of Canada. And it burns me to the core to realize that Trudeau, Justin's father, Pierre Trudeau, in 74, passed or allowed Gerald Bowie, the present president of the Bank of Canada, to borrow from private banks at interest. We had no national debt to speak of. We went through the Second War. We set up Medicare. We did a lot of infrastructure, universities. No national debt to speak of until Trudeau decided to borrow money at interest from private banks. Like, why the hell would he do that? That's to no advantage to the average Canadian whatsoever. It's a complete misappropriation of funds. So now you come forward from 74, 35 or 40 years, his son is now replacing the Bank of Canada with this private infrastructure giveaway. Theft. His kleptocratic family are now in a position they feel that they can tie all Canadians' hands to interest for anything of a public investment that's made at all three levels of government. I think he's in for a surprise, actually.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because a lot of people complain yet do nothing. So, and then when you're looking at Parliament, it's almost like everybody's in zombie mode. The senators we have in place, short of beating them all up, I have to wonder, if they have any brains.
Well, I agree totally. For example, and I've said this so many times, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the MPs voted to bomb the shit out of Libya and destroy that country. And I have to ask, even before this so-called revolution was complete, that group of revolutionaries set up a private bank. Like, that's never happened before. So here's the big question. Where is the Libyan gold, right? That money's got to go back to Libya so they can rebuild the damage we did to them. Canada under Harper led that attack, by the way. So we have a huge obligation to the people of Libya. And that, by the way, was passed by pretty well every MP in Parliament except Elizabeth May. How the hell does that happen? How do these people get elected?
I know.
They're morally bankrupt, these people.
Well, the thing is the senators don't get elected, but like even the MPs and everything else, okay? The whole thing is a setup. And this is what I was trying to convey to Tracy Ramsey last night. Paul mentioned that the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform, she was saying, you need to talk to your MPs and blah, blah, blah. The same BS that they always talk about. Contact Parliament, I mean, forget that. I mean, that's a joke. But Paul mentioned, he says, they say, Comer's actually sent a whole bunch of newsletters to all the MPs for a long time. And Paul is asking, do they actually read them? So she answers, I don't receive them. She says, I'll check it, but I've never seen them. She says, also, individual voters who write with their full address hold more weight than organizations. The more people can engage with elected officials, the greater the pressure. Well, I call bullshit on that statement from her. So I answered, about 2 a.m. this morning. Put down Tracy Ramsey. What the NDP MPs need to do is to start talking about changing our Constitution to reflect the changes of 1982. We, the people, are the shareholders of the Crown Corporation. The text needs to reflect that once and for all, and to remove all rights by the government to act as the Queen. Our elections are all fraudulent against the people since 1931 and a bigger slap in our faces in 1982. We demand direct democracy and the removal of final decision-making authority of government. That belongs to we, the people, and not to a bunch of people who don't even know our own history or create laws that affect all Canadians, which are unconstitutional, and can't even admit that our Constitution is a farce, and refuse to give us our rights instead of hold us hostage to a dictatorship. When will MPs have the balls to talk about this fact in Parliament? If this was done, then we would not be having to fight every issue under a constant dictatorship government.
Well, this is what really, really bothers me is that, there was a point in my naivete in the past where when elections came, I'd, wring my hands and say, okay, now I get to do this or do that. And then it's gone. And then you never hear or see a damn thing about politics until the next election, other than constant bickering and no way to input or influence the decision. Now I look
exactly. So, as an NDP MP, which is the same for federal and provincial, it's all the same. They're under the same constitution for their political party, which is something I know because of what I've looked at within the Liberals. And if I look at Alberta and the NDPs, what they're doing there, which is actually another crock of shit, which is no different than the Liberals. So I'm trying to kind of, come back with her and say, well, no matter who is in government, they never change it to benefit the people through referendums. We are held at gunpoint, and I, for one, am sick of it. And MPs who keep feeding us BS and keep the dictatorship alive.
Well,
do these people have no soul or brains?
They have bank accounts offshore. That's all that counts, right?
Right. So I put down, no offense, but this needs to be addressed. No human being in their right mind would allow what is happening to this country if they truly cared about the people. Why should we, the people, even listen to the NDP or any political parties, as political parties are death traps to Canadians? Please rethink about this long and hard. See it from our eyes, and maybe, just maybe, you will understand us. 150 years proves it.
Well, the big...
And this needs to change.
Which it absolutely needs to change. And, it's nice that we're nibbling towards proportional representation so people are at least starting to think about...
Yeah, but this is not Bob.
I know that. No. I know that. But the point is this. We've been in this intransigent position for 150 years. Just to put this on the table and get people to approve of any change to our governance is a win, Nicole. It's a win. It's not what we want right now.
If you look at proportional representation... That's a big zero, because if you look at the European Union and all of the other countries that have proportional representation, they are trying to run away from it. And that's a fact. And in Canada, it's like we're being blindsided. We're not even paying attention to what's going on internationally. And then, look at this, proportional representation. Well, how many years have they had this in other countries? That most Canadians don't even know what the hell proportional representation is.
Well,
but yet we fail. Before we even accept this, we need to look at the outcomes of everywhere else.
I agree totally. We have to have some research on it. And I'm going to have a fellow on the program within the next couple of weeks who's very keen on this. He has a program or a system that's not just straight up PR. It's a modified form, and I'll let him explain it. But once we start the discussion of this and not have these conflict of interest personalities in corporate structured political parties, corporate funded political parties, for the most part, at least, sure, they may not officially give money to the Liberals federally in the present structure federally, but, I can't believe for a picosecond that stuff doesn't happen under the table. And as long as there's no transparency and we do not get to make the final decision, that will continue. And that's what they want to continue. It gives them the power to...
That's what we're going to get with PR, because as long as we do not remove final decision-making authority, we're up shit creek with no paddle.
I agree. Okay, so that will be a big question when I speak to David, and I'll try to run some stuff past you, and I'm going to see if we can get you and him together on the same show by telecommunications. well, look, let me tell you, he knows what he's talking about, and he's extremely eloquent. I'm going to have to try to keep him to use layperson's language on this. And he's soft-spoken, too. He's not going to be like you and me, where, I bring a crowbar to these discussions so I can wedge my way in and get some words in. And I like that. I totally like the passion you bring to this subject because it's worthy. It's totally worthy of being emotionally invested in this because everything we do and want politically is hinging on the system of governance and elections that we have. And it's not working, people. It's a bullshit system. It's a soft democracy. It's actually a soft fascist environment we're working in right now. And it's not going to get better on its own. It's going to get infinitely worse. The only way to get media back in line so they work for the public and to get all the other institutions, Health Canada, that group that's gone crazy over there, used to be Tunney's Pasture. I'm not sure where they're hiding now, but they totally have to be brought in and reined in and cleaned up big time. And that goes through all the provinces as well, because they are working to promote corporate business at the expense of primarily First Nations. But also, don't kid yourself, people. All of us are being thrown to the wolves with this system. And our own employees, these MPs in Parliament, gave themselves a raise immediately after the Liberals got elected. And then they continued with the austerity so-called regime that Harper put together at the G20 in 2010 in Toronto. This regime is an impoverishment scheme, people, to force us to give up the assets we own because the federal government's claiming we cannot afford not just to maintain the present structures, but to build new ones, which is a complete and utter lie. And do you think Trudeau would be a liar? Anyone got an answer on that? Could Justin Trudeau possibly make misstatements of the fact on something so huge as the entire infrastructure rebuild of Canada? Is that possible that he could be corrupt on that file, someone?
Yeah, but listen, you can't just blame Justin Trudeau here. How many Liberals do we have in power?
They're all just like that. They're all exactly like that, actually, to tell you the truth.
But people focus on just him. He's just the figurehead there. It's everything behind it.
Sure enough.
That is the problem.
So it's the infrastructure of our governance itself, everything that we inherited from the colonial system, that the banks have forced us into. We have to clean this house. Or, Libya was a warning call, people. The States is not a very well-liked country globally. Canada used to be a very popular country. It wasn't perfect. Let's be abundantly clear on that. However, it was looked upon as fairly fair and transparent and maybe not always honorable, but not always just, but somewhat more so than the States and even perhaps more so than Britain. Not anymore. We've lost that. That's all out the window. And so I think it's time we stop and take a very hard look at ourselves and ask, what do we want? Do we want a political system that we celebrate? That we celebrate, Nicole. That when issues are on the table, people are wringing their hands with glee. Oh, yeah, when's the date for the vote? When's the date for the vote? You know what I'm saying? And we get turnouts of 90%. You watch it. That's what will happen. People will be engaged because they will realize they have an effective voice. And the thing...
Yeah, because right now they don't. Like, if you're looking at and I want to bring this up because if you're looking at the BC elections, they're saying that 50.5% went out and voted.
Yeah. Okay,
let's be clear here. That's not 50.5% of the over 18 population. That's only 50.5% of those who were registered to vote.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. The number gets worse and worse the more you look at it, the more closely you peel the layers off the onion. And
because a lot of people don't file their taxes or don't even want to be added to the elections. And if you don't put that little, check mark, you're not going to get you're not going to be part of the elections at all. So unless you do that, you won't be able to do it unless you make arrangements just before the elections, and hopefully you'll be in time if you really want to vote. But now we know that voting only gives away our proxy rights to the government to govern over us. and because we don't have really final decision-making authority. So that's all a crock of, it's all false advertising when you look at how Canada is supposed to be run with, referendums and, Canada has direct democracy. Every time I see that at the UN, I want to throw up.
Well, not only that, we had the election, as you say, and then all the pundits start declaring what their attitude is to the results, and they keep saying, so-and-so has a majority now, or they could get a majority later. I'm like, what? What? Get your dictionary out, people. This is not a majority. It's a plurality. And the more you deceive yourself, the further away from reality and the further away from correcting this fault you will become. So we have a plurality system when really, as you've pointed out on previous shows, since the corporate law is really what we need to look at when we're talking about who really owns and runs this country, that we really should have 51% before any government takes authority. 51%. Like now in BC, we've got 40-40 and 16.
And that's not just those who have signed up for to get their election papers. That is 51% of the whole 35 million.
I hear you, and I would like to do that, and we should be having a campaign to bring people under the big umbrella. But here's the kicker, and you can't deny it. The government has been so dastardly the last 20 years or so. They've been so dishonest, so deceitful, so opaque in their operations, and damn it, they've been so intentionally mean-spirited that a lot of people want to stay invisible. That's their option if they want to do that. Although I agree totally, we should try to, as part of, reconciliation and part of rediscovery of who we are as a nation, we should have a project to get as many people as we can registered and start off from there. But I don't blame people if they want to be invisible to the government, and that's their option.
But when you're a shareholder of Canada, that would be totally ridiculous. Because you have a voice.
Yeah.
This is your country.
Yep.
And if we wanted to, all of the natural resources corporations out here, the ones, all the billions of dollars, we did a show on that, that we're giving away with all our prosperity funds, billions of dollars to these corporations who just turn around and let go of employees anyway and give themselves bonuses like Bombardier and not just that, Tembec Inc., just got $200 million.
Right.
And they were threatening in 2014 of closure if the guys didn't accept, 2%. These guys don't even get a 4% pay. They get a 2% pay because they were forced into accepting less money because, the company was going to go under. Well, the thing is the company turned around, went and got loans to give themselves bonuses.
Yes.
And then they're holding hostage, over 5,000 people in a small town.
Yes.
With closure. Well, I would say give the people that $200 million.
And a seat or two on the board of directors of Tembec.
Well, the thing is, as a seat or two, no, I would say to Tembec, if you cannot, you're threatening closure. There's $200 million coming in, and now that will belong to the people. And tough luck.
Well, there are ways to soften that. And I'm not saying, that I disagree with what you're saying. I'm trying to find a middle ground. And that way would be that the company in the initial stages could take some of the percentage of any incomes generated.
Really, the company should get 49% and the people 51%.
Well, there you go. I'd be happy with that myself. And any company that's on the brink and might not survive or will not survive without the loan should be happy with that too, damn it. This is public money from people who are taxed already to put that money out there. And then these companies come along and fill their own pockets with this. And the federal or provincial governments don't give a damn. They're totally unaccountable for these public assets and the cash. So, that brings us to this other issue of labor rights as human rights, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because this is where we are in this day and age, people. And this is what I was saying back in 98 when I went through WCB and some other stuff I've spoken of before on this show. And I was able to show certain types of injuries are a result of the treatment of people in the workplace, psychological injuries. And now that's a given, and there's a whole new standard out there from Canadian Standards Association with the Canada Mental Health Group, and this is to help provide a psychologically safe work environment. Well, now you provided for me, thank you very much, an article written by Larry Savage called Labor Rights as Human Rights, a response to Roy Adams. I'm just going to read one paragraph, the beginning. In recent years, a number of leading industrial relations scholars, including Roy Adams, have endeavored to link labor rights and human rights in an attempt to shift the debate about the nature of labor relations in the North American context. Specifically, Adams and others have argued that workers should not be viewed as economic interests, but rather as bearers of fundamental human rights. And there is a certain appeal to the labor rights as human rights approach. Indeed, the normative weight associated with human rights discourse in liberal democratic societies has made it a popular political tool for social movements looking to press their demands. Now, this article, I'm not going to read the whole thing now. I'm going to have to think about it, edit it, and maybe read it next week or in a subsequent week. But because you don't want to mess with the ability of unions to organize under collective bargaining contracts and be able to strike. And what part of this discussion on human rights and labor rights revolves around is this nonsense of giving people the right to assemble, but not the right to strike. And
that was pretty. That really threw me for a loop, I'll tell you.
I bet. That's a very, very egregious situation. And it's the federal government doing double speak again, like they're working for corporations. And so the kicker here is that people have a right to work, a right to be treated fairly in the workplace. And if they're injured or even have a natural disease of some sort, they have a right to be accommodated. And you brought this particular Canadian Human Rights Direct article involving Carl Kelly and the University of British Columbia, where he had been diagnosed with a particular Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he has some certain issues, ADHD. And so he was dismissed from a teaching program he was involved in as a student at the University of BC, a student doctor, by the way, so that he would upgrade his skills and then could use the knowledge he got at UBC. But he was not allowed to continue. And it turned out that the duty to accommodate is now being considered as a charter right. Mm-hmm. This is huge, people, because if you're working away and you start feeling odd, you've been there for decades, and you go to your doctor and you say, hey, you got this lifelong disease, I'm afraid to tell you, sorry to tell you, but, you're going to have these conditions encroaching on your life as you go forward. And then your boss or your employer hears this and then does a constructive dismissal game where they say, oh, well, we're reorganizing this and that, and sorry, there's no more room for you here, John Doe. And so you're down the road after like 20, 25, 35 years. Your age is like 50, 55, can't take retirement. You're down the road. Well, that's not going to happen much anymore because it looks like the duty to accommodate workers who have an injury, even a natural disease injury, is the duty of the employer. And this is huge, people, because you cannot have all these technological changes and new ways to diagnose disorders even before they manifest themselves in the patient, so that insurance companies and health providers can start labeling employees, information that eventually ends in the hands of the employee's employer, and then to protect themselves for any kind of financial loss they perceive in the future, they start working on that employee to get rid of them. You can't live without a job, people. And, they can talk about guaranteed incomes until hell freezes over, and we always should have the ability to earn more money. We don't want to be locked into a fixed income.
Well, I don't see how, without direct democracy, even with this labor rights as human rights and all of these issues, the multitude of issues that Canadians are going through today would not happen if we had direct democracy, period.
I agree. No doubt. I agree with that entirely. I don't think we can make a step from what we've got now, though, into direct democracy in one go. I think we're going to have to nibble our way into it.
Why not? Why not? One referendum, and on major issues, they would have to come to us.
Well, you're right about that.
Why not they, that's doable.
Well, it is if we get a momentum of signatories to the I accuse document, the document.
Yeah, because you know what? Telling you this, Bob? Because everybody forgets that in Canada, in our Constitution, we are offered direct democracy. Referendums, we do not get them.
That's in the charter?
Yeah, the referendums.
Well, then it's really our problem for not going after it, isn't it?
Exactly. That's why we're not asking for something we don't already have. We're supposed to already have that, especially since 1982, as the shareholders. What we're demanding is our existing rights.
So you think, well, how many signatories would we have to have, or do we need to have that to make this thing move forward?
If I had to challenge them in court, we don't need 51%, okay? That's just what the law states. But I'd be able to prove, I think, without, prove, that would be a little hard. But with the help of, StatsCan and we were to subpoena Elections Canada, how many people are signed up to vote? Now, if you only have, in an area of 1 million people and only 400,000 went to vote or are registered, then we should only have to match what that was.
I see where you're at there, right? We would want everyone to be registered, if they choose to, they can. That would be ideal, but if they don't want to, as I said earlier.
Well, we need the people to start acting as what they are, which is the actual shareholders of this country, and to actually, say something. And to actually stand up and help us rule this country as the citizens, and stop demanding a nanny to take care of us and then whine every 5 seconds because we're not happy. And now we're going into globalization. So now the Supreme Court, if you look at the International Labor Organization, the papers that I sent you, I mean, there's a lot of these things that they've agreed to we'd be able to walk away from, because these treaties are actually going to be, here it says, for the freedom of association and protection of the rights to organize convention from 1948, which is outdated, and it's still in effect to this day, hasn't really been changed. It says the next period during which the convention may be denounced, the 4th of July 2020 to the 4th of July 2021. So we'd have 1 year to denounce this, or to change it, or to renew it, or to renegotiate it, within the international scope, if we wanted to. But as Canadian citizens, because we're not, fully under international law yet, however, our courts are heading us that way, because they are now accepting what the International Labor Organization has been stating at the Supreme Court level. So now there's a lot of court cases that have happened within Canada where the provincial government supersedes the federal government, given the corporations and when employer rights are. So when you're looking at Ontario saying, we've got these people going to court, or the union going to court, and then the government says, well, you have the right to association, but a right to association does not mean that you have the right to strike or to negotiate.
Well,
you have the right of association. So remember that court case?
Yes, but the point is I think there was a settlement on that where it was stated, or at least an overview that was stated, you can't expect people to negotiate without the right to strike, because then negotiations will be interminable. They will never be ended.
But my point is that you have to go to provincial court, and then all the lower courts, like the committees, they have to go to committees. Then they had to go to the courts, provincial and superior court, and then in the end, they went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says, we'll go with what the International Labor Organization says.
Right, when we have a charter.
Yeah.
Well, what we've got...
I mean, this is common sense, right? So why did these people and taxpayers pay for all of these things to happen in court at all levels because of the commissions and all this that we pay for?
Yep.
Why were we having to go through all that for, 20-minute decision?
Right. Well,
Mr. Kelly, that court case, 7 years?
yeah, that's crazy. Who's got the finances, the wherewithal to go through a 7-year court case? That's not justice. That's not justice at all.
No, and right now, what they're doing at the Supreme Court level is now because they're looking at international courts superseding ours.
Yeah, that's bullshit. That should not be.
This is where it's wrong.
Yes,
This is where it's wrong.
Okay, well, I'm going to throw two words on the table. They are critical race. And these two words come from computer engineering. And when you have a clock on your computer, all computers are clock driven, and it's clocking through various registers so that data is shuffled to be available when those registers can use it. And so you've got to have the data in place, and you can't have it crashing against other flows of data, and that is all called a critical race. I suggest in politics in Canada, with Trudeau especially, right now, we're in a political critical race because he, on several fronts, seems to be trying to force through legislation super quick, very, very powerful legislation, 300-page omnibus bill he wants through in a week or 10 days. Like he's going to prescribe how long it's going to take to do this, and that will change the type of infrastructure we have and the infrastructure funding. Then you've got the International Labor Organization, same thing. He's pushing all these UN and international agreements that he thinks we will accept supersede our charter. I don't see why we would want to do that. And I don't see how we can stop him if we don't have a majority in this dysfunctional political system.
Well, we're not going to be able to stop him until the Canadians stand up and sign the Citizens' Convention of Consent, get together and actually take care of their responsibility and stop whining after MPs or criticizing MPs who don't even know anything anyways. We need to become responsible. And that's the bottom line here. Direct democracy. We already are supposed to have this. We're not inventing something new here, but people need to start educating themselves as to who they are within this country. Are you a slave or are you actually a shareholder? Which one do you want to be? Because if the majority of the people do not realize this, they are forcing all of us into a slavery system that has to stop.
Yes, I've been saying that 40% can enslave the rest of the population. So we've only got 2 minutes. Can you tell everyone where they can go to read this document for consent?
Yeah, the Convention of Consent is on myfreedom2017.com and on i-accuse with1c.com. And they could also look up change.org for moratorium on privatization and globalization. If we do not stop these things from happening, we might as well just jump off a bridge.
Well, my dad used to say, if somebody jumped off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge?
Well, normally I wouldn't, but the thing is right now we're all standing on the bridge and we only have, so many people ready to cut the line because they don't want to become responsible citizens.
Well, I said to you, I think a year ago, that Justin Trudeau may be actually the perfect prime minister for this project.
Oh, absolutely. He was born and bred for it.
Yep. He's been totally conditioned and raised to slip into the position he's got, and he thinks it's going to be a cream puff job. I think he's going to have his hands full, especially out west here, and it's going to cascade. I have to let you go. I really appreciate you coming up.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
You betcha. Take care, Nicole.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nicole Lebrasseur, a champion of direct democracy and somebody who could very, very easily change the makeup of this country because the time is right.